During that Tuesday evening in Silver Pines County, the rain was not only pouring, it was also drumming, performing a chilly and persistent percussion on the roof of the cruiser that Patrolman Riggs was driving. Using a little penknife, a person was carefully removing something from the base of the tree while hunkered down against the incessant rain. Why is that old snob acting like that? Making a public property seem bad when the weather's like this. Officer Vance was beside him, and he was wiping the fog off the passenger window. His breath was causing the glass to get frosted. It seems to be the case. Maybe a poster or a sticker of some form. Not a typical location for graffiti. The combination of boredom and a nagging feeling of unfettered power eventually turned into an opportunity. It's evening. It is more comparable to vandalism and trespassing. This is a violation of the municipal code that pertains to public bathrooms. According to my understanding, Section 12.4 causes damage to the bark. A wallet made of worn leather was carefully removed by him. Do you live in this neighborhood? Do you seem to be out of place? His voice was filled with a sense of mistrust. Riggs' mental picture of the rich and often entitled citizens of Silver Pines did not include Arthur Pendleton because of his calm dignity and exact words. His appearance was more akin to that of a retired librarian who had strayed out too far. It was not fury, rather it was a sudden and intense intensity, comparable to the formation of ice on a calm pond in an instant. His spine began to tingle with a chilly sensation that had nothing to do with the rain. Slowly, he reached back into the pocket of his jacket's pocket. Both of the cops were nervous, and their hands became drawn to their sidearms. As an alternative to a weapon, he took out a straightforward card holder made of black leather that was engraved with a little seal that exuded dignity. Under the light of Riggs' flashlight, he opened it by flipping it over and holding it firmly.
Hey!
His voice pierced through the rain. It was as if the comfortable and unquestionable authority of their police cruiser had vanished. They were not just confronted with an elderly individual. Rather, they were standing in the rain in front of the physical incarnation of the highest legal authority in the country. In contrast to vandalism, this is an act of civic duty. Your allegation of trespassing is without foundation, since my house is located inside the boundaries of this jurisdiction, citing the county police chief, who, as both officers were aware, previously worked as a clerk for a federal court and would most likely pass out upon hearing about this interaction. Alternatively, might it be the Office of Professional Standards? It seems that this is exactly the type of situation that their quarterly evaluations are trying to bring to light and correct them. With regard to this relatively small occurrence, your desire for a custodial interrogation is not only not appropriate, it is also a significant misunderstanding of your legal power, and it is on the verge of being considered misbehavior. His written views had the potential to undermine the foundations of police processes such as the one they were clumsily trying to implement. Now, officers, he began, his eyes gripping theirs with the weight of decades interpreting the same Constitution they were sworn to preserve. Let's address this little trip downtown. Riggs stutteringly stumbled as the lantern fell to his side, revealing his own boots that were wet in rain. Suddenly, the laminated card that he was holding seemed like a coal that was still burning. When Vance made an involuntary step back, he accidentally collided with the fender of the cruiser. I think I have some important jurisprudence to impart. We will begin by discussing the meaning of the term probable cause and the parameters of what constitutes a Terry stop. Should we get started? Listen, Grandpa Law School, he said, attempting to take control of the situation. Give us a break from the lecture. Simply get inside the vehicle. At the station, we may have a conversation about your legal beliefs. Even though he was still very short, he seemed to have grown taller when he adjusted his stance somewhat. A trip to the downtown area. What about the elimination of litter? Seems that this is a very significant escalation, Officer Vance. A hammer blow was delivered to the anvil of their careers with each and every sentence. He went into depth on the pertinent case law, which included Pennsylvania v. Mims and Heibel v. 6th Judicial District Court, not to brag about his accomplishments, but rather to analyze their acts in a surgical manner. He referred to the chilling effect that police overreach has on regular persons who are exercising their liberties in a matter of innocent actions. He brought up the recent circuit court orders that he had drafted, which tightened rules on pretextual stops in a manner that was almost superficially casual. The portrait was obviously of Arthur Pendleton, but he was dressed in the robes of a Supreme Court judge. Below it, in a typeface that is clear and authoritative, is Terry v. Ohio, a case that you are acquainted with? Or possibly the principles of the Fourth Amendment about the constitutionality of excessive seizures? Officer, yes, it is a penknife. Peeling stickers and opening mail are two examples. It's just about the opposite of a tool for chaos, since long before the zoning changes. Arthur Pendleton, 78 years old, was shown his driver's license, which he turned up at 14 Crestview Drive. Strangely, we police this beat on a regular basis. I can't say that I've seen you around that much. Something of a recluse? What are you trying to conceal? The beam created by Riggs' flashlight shook. The mouth of Vance hung wide, a perfect O representation of the oncoming terror. It could be a good idea to take a short trip downtown and figure out how to handle this situation. In order to emphasize his point, he tapped the shackles on his belt. Because of a flyer, a guy of his age would spend the night in a freezing cell. This was the menace that hovered in the moist air. An address that is less than 3 streets away. I was wondering what you were doing to the tree. Let us shake his cage, will we? Shine a light on the transition, Vance said, dead out here, as he scanned the desolate streets of the upper-class area that was soaked with rain. Is it true that we are now municipal code experts? Pops, let's have a look at some identification. What is the matter with the knife? Is it a weapon? Just pensioners and their prize roses? A groan came from Riggs as he saw movement in the vicinity of the big oak tree that was located at the end of Magnolia Lane. Can I help you, Vance? Became squinty. They arrived, their tires screeching on the tarmac that was moist. The guy was trapped like a specimen by the high beams. What time you found this video? And leave a like and a comment. Let's get back to the story. He was in his late 70s, had a modest physique, and was wearing a waxed jacket that was old, but immaculately clean over a tweed vest. The rain clung to his scalp like a thin white blanket of hair. He did not quiver when he saw the lights. Rather, he just completed his meticulous scrape, pocketed a little piece of paper that was wet, and wiped his knife on a handkerchief before turning his eyes, remaining calm behind the rain-spattered glasses. Let us know where you are watching from. Evening, gentlemen, he began, his voice a low rumble that was really rather steady, despite the fact that it was freezing outside. The rain was soaking Riggs' collar, but he ignored it and walked out of the house, his utility belt creaking with a sense of self-importance. When asked about it, the guy said, removing an improperly placed campaign flyer while pointing to the wet shred of paper that was in his pocket. As Vance stepped around the cruiser, he let out a snort. The guy let out a sigh that sounded like the rustle of dry leaves. Under the light of his flashlight, Riggs examined it. What about Pendleton? Does not set off any alarms. With a level head, Arthur answered, I have lived in this location for 42 years, officer. Under the guise of a dirty policeman, Vance leaned in. Is that 42 years, huh? Before Arthur's stare was peaceful, now it became more intense. He blinked his eyes. What about Terry versus Ohio? It seemed like something related to the law. This pertains to the Supreme Court. Arthur remained still. An official identity card was the object that was lit by the light, not a driver's license. The Honorable Arthur W. Pendleton, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. It felt as if the rain was roaring even louder in the sudden and crushing calm. It was quieter than it had been before, but Justice Pendleton's voice resounded with an authority that caused their bones to quiver. Under Riggs and Vance's feet, the earth did not only move, rather it disappeared entirely. Sir, Your Honor, Justice Pendleton, the justice, hid his identification. What I was doing, officers, was only picking up rubbish. It was not a loud voice that he used. He had no reason to do so. Would you like me to contact Chief Henderson directly? Pendleton inquired in a subdued manner. Suddenly, Vance's face was utterly devoid of any color. Riggs seemed to be hurt physically. Not at all, Your Honor, dear sir. Without a doubt, it is not required. In an attempt to seem attentive, Riggs stutteringly stumbled over his words. What hovered in the air was the hushed rage of those who were genuinely principled. The last thing he said was, Officers, your thoroughness is commendable, and his voice was as solid as stone. The decision was made to immediately put Riggs and Vance on administrative leave awaiting the results of a comprehensive review. The interaction was analyzed by legal experts as a masterclass in the application of constitutional law in real-time situations. They sought to play a power game against an unassuming elderly guy, but it backfired with a force that was disastrous and ended their career. It was via the most severe means available that they came to understand that genuine authority does not consist of bluster or threats. Rather, it is rooted in calm understanding, steadfast principle, and the ability to hold even the most insignificant individuals who wield power responsible to the highest law of the state. A troubling trend was discovered by Internal Affairs. Riggs and Vance had a history of fishing expeditions, which consisted of stopping individuals for small offenses in order to dig for greater charges. They often targeted senior residents and members of minority groups who were less likely to speak out against their activities. Even more concerning was the fact that their actions had been implicitly fostered by a culture inside the agency that valued arrests more than true justice. On a rain-soaked sidewalk, beneath the glare of a police car's headlights, Justice Pendleton delivered one of the most powerful verdicts of his career. He did this without ever raising his gavel in court on that particular day. The media frenzy became even more intense. There were news vehicles parked in front of the courthouse. Legal observers discussed whether or not this might result in a major Supreme Court decision on police excess. Ironically, Justice Pendleton himself could be required to disqualify himself from the case. The elderly guy who was considered to be wrong ended up being the final judge of their behavior. Body cam rules were made more stringent. The boards that oversee the community have acquired some fangs. They did not go down well with the committee. They were not only fired from their employment, but they also lost their credible reputation. Riggs made an effort to portray himself as the victim by delivering an emotional interview in which he spoke about just doing my job. But the public compassion was non-existent. The fact that Vance really drafted a letter of apology to Pendleton came as a complete surprise to everyone. The hearing was broadcast on television. However, when Vance, who was now working as a security guard, went to a local law enforcement ethics conference a year later, he discovered a single folded letter waiting for him at the sign-in counter. He did not call for any harsh changes or dismissals of employees. In its place, he offered a straightforward inquiry. The late-night hosts had a great time as well. After receiving a very early and very brief phone call from Justice Pendleton's chambers, it is now taught at police schools as a cautionary tale about the limits of authority and the need of humility. There was no personal grudge against them, rather it was a question of principle. The fact that two cops were so willing to misuse their power with him, an old guy who was removing a sticker, raises the question of how many other people they intimidated. If he hadn't been the person he was, how many more people would they have been able to intimidate? The chief, who was pale and sweating bullets, initiated an internal inquiry that swiftly revealed a pattern of similar low-level intimidations committed by the two. In addition to having a strong sense of responsibility, Justice Arthur Pendleton has a lengthy memory. On the other hand, it is essential that it be tempered with judgment, moderation, and a genuine respect for the rights that you have taken an oath to safeguard rather than destroy. It is important to keep in mind that the badge is a public trust and not a license to intimidate. Enjoy your evening. Major misunderstanding, to say the least. Justice Pendleton, please accept our apologies. Our sincerest apologies. It was a wobbly and high-pitched voice that Vance discovered and used. I concur, Mr. Many apologies. Simply put, we were trying to be comprehensive. Unquestionably too enthusiastic. It's never going to happen again. While Justice Pendleton watched them for a considerable amount of time, the rain was causing his hair to go flat. He did not wait for a response to his question. Arthur Pendleton, an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, walked calmly down the sidewalk towards his home on Crestview Drive, disappearing into the rainy gloom. He left behind two officers who were soaked not only by the rain, but also by the cold sweat of impending professional doom. Pendleton turned his back on the stunned patrolman and walked away. The Silver Pines County Police Department was there during an earthquake that occurred the next day. It seemed inevitable that the news of the meeting would make its way into the national news. Cops stop Supreme Court Justice over littering. Judicial bench meets street beat. Both Riggs and Vance were not only fired from their professions, but they also became cautionary stories that were discussed at police academies all throughout the country. Not only were the two patrolmen who attempted to intimidate a Supreme Court justice suspended from their positions, but their narrative did not stop after that. "I'm so sorry." Pendleton secretly launched a formal judicial investigation into the training practices of the Silver Pines County Police Department. 1 month after the notorious incident that occurred on a wet night, the investigation had a snowball effect. Then the legal actions began. As a result of Pendleton's public stance, a local civil rights attorney was inspired to bring a class action lawsuit on behalf of 12 persons who had been wrongfully detained or harassed by Silver Pines cops. An invitation to speak before a state oversight committee was extended to Chief Henderson, who was wearing his dress blues and was sweating profusely. Chief Henderson, the chairman of the committee, said, "How does a police department allow its officers to believe they can detain a citizen, let alone a Supreme Court justice, for removing a campaign sticker?" Although Henderson stumbled over his words and referred to isolated incidents, in ongoing retraining the harm had already been done, in a move that was nothing short of astounding. Justice Pendleton himself filed a written comment, although not in his capacity as a judge, but rather as a citizen. When officers mistake authority for power and compliance for justice, who polices the police? A rallying cry was created out of the question. All of the state's police forces were frantically trying to take a look at their own training programs. At Riggs and Vance. There was never a public response from the justice. 2 phrases were written within, in a handwriting that was exact and elegant. "Do better. There is no signature. None is required." The incident of the police officers who harassed a Supreme Court justice ended up becoming a legend many years later. And if you ever find yourself in Silver Pines County, you will make a peculiar observation. The oak tree that is located on Magnolia Lane is still standing, but there are no campaign stickers ever placed on it. It is said by some that the local police force ensures it. On the off chance